Okay. Can you see the Playmobil, people? Excellent. Well done. Right. Okay. So, let's press record just for people who aren't here. Yeah? Okay. So let's remind ourselves what happened last week. Last week was a bit of a sad story. See how much you can remember. So Jesus was betrayed by one of the 12 apostles, Judas Iscariot, who had once been his friend. Jesus was arrested and taken away. And then they put a blindfold on him and they hit him. And they said, if you're so clever, tell us which one of us hit you. Then they tied his hands together and they took him to Pontius Pilate. He's the one in red. He was the Roman governor and he sentenced Jesus to death. Then they put a purple robe on him and a crown of thorns on his head. And then they pretended to worship him like a king. Can you see them bowing down to him? And they laughed at him. And then they beat him again. And then they hung him on the cross with nails to die. And as he died, he said, "It is finished." Because Jesus knew that he had done the job that he had come to earth to do. Jesus had died to take the punishment for every wrong thing that every person in the whole world has ever done or ever will do, so that we don't have to, because he loves us that much. Now, one thing I didn't tell you last week was that after Jesus had died, the soldiers pushed a spear into his side, just to be extra sure that he was really dead before they took his body down from the cross. Can you see that one of the soldiers in the picture has a spear in his hand? Now, there was a rich man called Joseph of Arimathea. He's the one in the red tunic with the yellow sash, and he's holding Jesus's body. Now, Joseph of Arimathea hadn't wanted Jesus to be killed, and he was upset about it. So he went to Pontius Pilate and he asked if he could take Jesus's body for burial. Joseph of Arimathea, because he was a rich and important man, had a tomb cut into some rock in a garden, which was going to be for when he died himself, because in those days, rich, important people were buried in their own tombs. But Joseph wanted to give his tomb to Jesus. Now, the other people in the picture are the women who loved Jesus, who had been waiting at the foot of the cross when Jesus died. One of them was called Mary Magdalene. She's got a blue dress on and the light brown hair. Then Joseph wrapped Jesus's body in strips of linen cloth and a burial cloth, which is the big white cloth that you can see that looks a bit like a big white sheet. And then they took it to Joseph's tomb in the rock. And the women went too. And they watched where they had put him. Joseph put Jesus's body, all wrapped up, into the tomb and then began to roll a big, heavy stone across the entrance. Now, you can't really see from the picture, but that big stone was so heavy that it would have needed some extra help to roll it across. I don't think he would have been able to do it on his own. And because of the way the rock was cut, as the stone rolled into position, it would have dropped down slightly, and then that would have made it very difficult to move it back again. And then the tomb was closed. And the women were still there watching. Now, some of the Jewish leaders had heard a rumor that Jesus had said he would rise from the dead. And as we know, Jesus did say that. Well, these Jewish leaders, they said to themselves, well, we've got rid of him. We don't want his disciples to come and steal the body and then pretend he has risen from the dead. Then people will want to follow him again instead of listening to us. So they put a seal on the tomb and then arranged for some soldiers to guard the entrance. It was a very sad day. But then at sunrise on the Sunday morning, the third day, the women who had seen where Jesus's body had been laid, including Mary Magdalene, went to the tomb. They were a bit worried about who they might be able to get to help them roll the stone away from the entrance. But what do you think had happened? The soldiers were nowhere to be seen. The tomb was open, and when they looked inside, Jesus's body was gone. All that was there were the strips of linen and the burial cloth neatly folded inside. The women were so upset. They had come to anoint Jesus's body with spices, which is what you did in those days. Can you see the big jars they had with them? They would have put about 70 pounds of spices on a body, which is a lot. But the body had gone, and they thought somebody had taken it away. But an angel appeared from inside the tomb. Remember, an angel is what we call a messenger from God. And the angel said, "Don't be alarmed. You're looking for Jesus, who was crucified. But he isn't here. He has risen. Go and tell his disciples." Well, Mary Magdalene did as the angel had told her, and she ran off to tell the disciples. Some of the disciples didn't believe the women at first, but Peter immediately ran off towards the tomb. Then John started running after him. John was a faster runner than Peter, and he overtook Peter, and he got there first, but he didn't go inside until Peter caught him up. John's the one in blue, and Peter is the one in green. Then they looked inside, and they saw that it was true. The body of Jesus wasn't there. Only the neatly folded grave clothes were left. Peter and John went home, but Mary stayed behind. She was so upset she was crying. And then she heard a man's voice behind her. "Why are you crying?" She said, "They've taken my Lord away, and I don't know where they've put him." She thought it was the gardener. "If you've taken his body, tell me where you've put him so I can go to him." "Mary," said the man's voice. And Mary turned around, and there was Jesus. It was Jesus who had spoken to her. He really had risen from the dead, and he was standing right behind her. "Don't touch me yet," he said. "I have to go back to my Father in heaven first." Now, later that evening, although I haven't got a picture for it, Jesus's disciples were all together in a locked room, all except Thomas. Thomas was missing. They had locked the doors because they were afraid of the Jews. And suddenly, Jesus appeared. It must have been a bit like that time when they were all together before, having that last meal before Jesus died. Well, they shouldn't have been surprised that Jesus could get through locked doors. He is Jesus after all. Getting through locked doors is no trouble for him. They were overjoyed to see him. He really had risen. He really was alive again. And that is the story of the very first Easter Sunday. I will just tell you one more thing though. Remember that I said one disciple, Thomas, wasn't there? Well, the others told him, "Jesus is alive. We've seen him. He really is." "I don't believe it was really him," said Thomas, "unless I actually see the nail marks in his hands and the place in his side where the soldiers put that spear. I can't believe it was really him." Well, a week later, they were together again with Thomas this time, and Jesus appeared again. Thomas, said Jesus, here are the nail marks, and here is the wound in my side from the spear. Stop doubting and believe. And Thomas knew that it was true, and he said, my Lord and my God. So the important things to remember from this week's story are this: Jesus did not stay dead. He rose again, and he's alive today. Death has no power over Jesus. Jesus actually has power over death. And if we put our trust in Jesus now, he will not only help us through this life, but we will have eternal life too, in heaven with him. So we're going to do our craft to help us remember the story and to help us to tell it to other people. And I think probably you can see me now rather than the Playmobil people. So the picture's going to look like this. It's going to have a stone in front of the hole in the tomb, and then you're going to be able to roll the stone away like that. So you should have a piece of paper like that, only yours is blue, mine's white because I ran out of blue, but you should have a blue piece. And then the first thing you need to do is to stick the sun on, because the sun's going to go behind the tomb. So stick the sun on the circle, because remember, it was first thing in the morning and the sun was just rising. And then while the glue's drying on that, if you stick these two pieces together, so you should have a piece like this and a piece like this. And if you stick those together, but if you look very carefully, and this is the only tricky bit, there's a little tiny hole just about there where you're going to stick your pin through. Don't cover the hole up. And then when that's done, if you stick it on the paper here, but there's a hole here as well, a hole in the page, make sure you don't cover the hole up with this bit. And then you can stick your cross on the top like that. And you can stick your stone across the hole like that. And then the last thing to do will be, you've got a piece of green like this. If you get your scissors and you do lots of little snips along the edge, it should look like this, like grass. And then you just stick it at the bottom, but only put the glue at the bottom, otherwise you'll stick it over the bit that's supposed to move, and that won't work. Okay, so if you unmute, and we'll go on to gallery view again, and then if you've got any questions, just ask.